Sometimes the thing that looks broken is the only thing telling the truth. The words would stay with Ethan Crawford long after that afternoon. But at that moment, he had no idea who Maya Johnson was, or why a quiet black waitress was about to change everything. The private dining room of the Grand Meridian Hotel glowed beneath crystal chandeliers. Around the polished walnut table sat some of the most influential investors in America. Billion-dollar acquisitions were being discussed between bites of steak and sips of sparkling water. At the center of it all sat Ethan Crawford, a 41-year-old tech billionaire whose company had transformed artificial intelligence across the country. People listened when Ethan spoke. Markets moved when Ethan made decisions. Yet the only person in the room who wasn't listening to him was his 8-year-old son. Noah sat alone near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. His small shoulders were tense. His eyes never left the tablet clutched tightly in his hands. Ethan barely noticed. He was finalizing a deal worth nearly $5 billion. Then suddenly, a sharp sound cut through the room. The tablet hit the carpet. Every conversation stopped. Noah jumped to his feet. His face was red with frustration. "Nobody listens to me," he shouted. Silence swallowed the room. Investors exchanged uncomfortable glances. Ethan's jaw tightened. Embarrassment flashed across his face. "Noah," he said firmly. "Not now." But the boy looked away. His fingers clenched into fists. For a second, he seemed smaller than usual. Sadder somehow. Then he sank into a chair and folded his arms. Ethan sighed and rubbed his temple. "I'm sorry, gentlemen," he muttered. "He's been having a difficult week." One of the software engineers standing nearby picked up the tablet. His expression quickly changed. "Sir, there's a problem." Ethan looked up. "What now?" "The device is completely locked. We can't access anything." Another engineer joined him. Then another. Within minutes, 3 highly paid specialists were staring at the screen. Password recovery failed. Backup systems failed. Security overrides failed. The room grew tense. The tablet wasn't just a device. It contained years of family memories. More importantly, it contained the last videos Noah had recorded with his mother before she passed away 3 years earlier. Ethan's confidence slowly faded. "Can you recover it?" he asked. Nobody answered immediately. Finally, one engineer cleared his throat. "We're not sure." Ethan leaned back heavily. The investors watched in silence. Across the room, Maya Johnson stood holding a tray of coffee cups. She had been serving the meeting all afternoon. Most people hadn't looked at her once. She moved quietly, efficiently, almost invisibly. But now she was watching Noah. Not the tablet. The boy. She noticed the tears he was trying desperately to hide. She noticed how he kept glancing toward his father. She noticed something everyone else seemed to miss. Ethan suddenly laughed, though there was frustration behind it. He gestured toward the tablet. "What is this? 3 engineers from a billion-dollar company, and nobody can fix one device." Nervous chuckles filled the room. Then his eyes landed on Maya. "Maybe our waitress can do better." More laughter followed. Ethan smirked and pointed toward the screen. "Tell you what," he said. "Fix this, and I'll give you $100 million. The room erupted. Investors smiled. Engineers shook their heads. It was obviously a joke. But Maya didn't laugh. She looked at Noah. Then she looked at Ethan. And for the first time all afternoon, she spoke. "What if the tablet isn't the thing that needs fixing?" The laughter died instantly. For a moment, nobody moved. The crystal glasses, the half-finished conversations, even the soft piano music drifting from the hotel speakers seemed to disappear. All eyes turned toward Maya Johnson. Ethan Crawford stared at her across the room. He was not angry. Not yet. Mostly, he was confused. The young waitress stood quietly beside her serving cart, one hand resting on the handle of the coffee pot. Her expression had not changed. She did not look nervous. She did not look impressed by the room full of executives. She simply looked at Noah. One of the engineers let out an awkward laugh. "I think the problem is pretty obvious," he said, lifting the lock tablet. "The device is corrupted. Several people nodded. Another engineer tapped the screen. We have already tried every standard recovery protocol. Maya glanced at the tablet for less than a second. Then her eyes returned to Noah. Maybe, she said softly. But that is not what he is worried about. Ethan folded his arms. And how exactly would you know that? Maya did not answer immediately. Noah was staring at the carpet. His sneakers barely touched the floor. His shoulders remained tense. The little boy looked completely disconnected from the expensive room around him. Maya had seen that look before. Many times. In hospitals. In waiting rooms. In school cafeterias. Children rarely said exactly what they felt. Their actions usually spoke first. May I ask him one question? She said. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Around the table, investors exchanged curious glances. One of them checked his watch. Another leaned forward. Something about the situation no longer felt like a joke. Ethan sighed. Fine. Maya set the coffee pot down and slowly walked toward Noah. Her steps were calm and unhurried. She stopped several feet away, giving him space. Hi, Noah, she said gently. The boy looked up. Can I ask you something? Noah shrugged. I guess. Maya nodded toward the tablet. Were you trying to fix something when this happened? The room waited. Noah blinked. His eyes filled with uncertainty. No, Maya nodded again. Were you trying to protect something? Noah looked away. His throat tightened. Ethan straightened in his chair. For the first time all afternoon, his attention shifted completely away from the business deal. Noah, he said. The boy remained silent. Maya did not push. She simply sat in the empty chair beside him. Sometimes, she said quietly, people hold on to things because they are afraid they might lose them. Noah swallowed hard. His fingers gripped the edge of the chair. Across the room, Ethan felt something uncomfortable stir inside him, a feeling he had been avoiding for years. Maya continued, and sometimes when people are hurting, they stop talking because they think nobody is listening. Noah's eyes suddenly filled with tears. The room became perfectly still. The engineers no longer cared about the tablet. The investors no longer cared about the deal. Even Ethan stopped thinking about the device. Because for the first time, he noticed something he should have seen weeks ago. Noah looked lonely. Not angry. Not difficult. Lonely. The realization landed like a weight in Ethan's chest. Then Noah finally whispered for words that changed everything. I did it myself. The words hung in the air like a confession nobody expected to hear. I did it myself. Noah stared at the floor as tears gathered in his eyes. Across the table, Ethan felt his stomach tighten. For several long seconds, nobody spoke. The engineers who had spent the last hour trying to unlock the device stood frozen. The investors who normally debated billion-dollar deals sat in complete silence. Maya remained calm. She did not rush to fill the quiet. She knew some truths needed room to breathe. Noah wiped his eyes with his sleeve. I knew the password, he whispered. I knew all of it. Ethan leaned forward. Then why lock it? The boy hesitated. His small fingers twisted together nervously. Because every time I tried to show you the videos, you were busy. The words landed harder than any accusation. Ethan opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Noah continued speaking, his voice shaking. You always said later, after the meeting, after the trip, after the call. His eyes drifted toward the dark tablet resting on the table. I thought if it stopped working, maybe you would finally look at it. A painful silence followed. Ethan stared at his son as memories flooded back. The unfinished conversations, the canceled dinners, the promises he fully intended to keep someday. Someday had become months, then years. Maya watched quietly. She had seen this pattern before. Adults often notice problems only after they became impossible to ignore. The tablet was never the real emergency. The loneliness was. One of the investors slowly removed his glasses. Another looked away, uncomfortable. Nobody expected a child to expose the truth in a room full of powerful adults. Ethan finally stood from his chair. The confidence, that usually surrounded him seemed strangely absent. "Noah," he said softly, "why did you not tell me?" Noah looked up. "I tried." The answer was simple, honest, devastating. Ethan felt every word. Maya lowered her eyes. She did not need to say anything. The lesson was unfolding on its own. Then one of the engineers cleared his throat. "Sir, if Noah knows the password, maybe we can still recover everything." The room seemed to wake up. Several people nodded hopefully. Ethan glanced toward the device. For the first time all afternoon, it no longer felt like the most important thing in the room. He walked slowly to his son and knelt beside him. The billionaire who negotiated with world leaders now looked like nothing more than a worried father. "Are the videos still there?" he asked gently. Noah nodded. "I think so." Ethan released a breath he had been holding for hours. Relief washed across his face. But Maya noticed something else. Noah was still afraid. Not about the videos. About being forgotten again. Then Ethan turned toward Maya. His expression had completely changed. The sarcasm was gone. The amusement was gone. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. Maya offered a small smile. "Just a waitress." But something in her eyes suggested there was far more to the story than anyone in that room realized. The question lingered in the room long after Ethan asked it. "Who are you?" Most people would have welcomed the attention. Most people would have rushed to explain themselves. Maya did neither. She simply picked up the coffee pot she had set down earlier and began refilling cups as if nothing unusual had happened. The investors watched her with growing curiosity. A few minutes ago, she had been invisible. Now she was the most interesting person in the room. "Just a waitress," she repeated quietly. Ethan studied her face. He had spent most of his life evaluating people. Entrepreneurs, executives, investors, competitors. He knew confidence when he saw it. Maya was not pretending to be calm. She genuinely was calm. That bothered him more than he expected. The engineers finally regained their focus and gathered around the tablet again. This time Noah stepped forward. His hands no longer trembled. He entered a password. The screen flashed. A loading symbol appeared. Then the home page returned. A collective breath swept through the room. The videos were still there. Noah smiled for the first time all afternoon. Ethan closed his eyes briefly in relief. The investors applauded politely. One of the engineers laughed nervously. "Looks like the mystery is solved." Maya glanced toward him. "Not yet." The engineer frowned. "The tablet is working." "Yes," Maya replied. "But that was never the mystery." Silence followed. Ethan looked at Noah, then at Maya. He knew she was right. Something deeper had happened in that room. Something no software update could fix. The business meeting resumed, but it no longer felt important. Charts appeared on screens. Financial projections were discussed. Yet Ethan noticed his attention drifting again and again toward his son. Noah sat quietly near the window, watching the city lights begin to glow as evening settled over Manhattan. For the first time in years, Ethan noticed how much older the boy looked. How much he had grown. How much he had missed. Meanwhile, Maya continued working. She cleared plates, refilled drinks, carried trays through the room with effortless grace. Not once did she draw attention to herself. Yet every person present seemed aware of her. Ethan found himself watching her as well. Something about her story did not add up. The way she spoke. The way she observed people. The way she immediately understood what everyone else overlooked. Those were not ordinary skills. As the meeting finally ended, investors gathered their jackets and briefcases. One by one, they congratulated Ethan on the deal. But before leaving, several of them quietly thanked Maya. She accepted each comment with the same small smile. Nothing more. When the room finally emptied, only 3 people remained. Ethan, Noah, Maya. Outside the windows, thousands of city lights sparkled beneath the darkening sky. Ethan walked toward her. "You knew the tablet was not the real problem almost immediately." Maya nodded. "Yes." "How?" She looked toward Noah. "Because children usually tell the truth." just not always with words. Ethan stood silent. Then Noah spoke from behind him. Dad. Ethan turned. Yeah, buddy? Noah hesitated. Can we watch the videos together tonight? The question seemed simple, but Maya noticed the fear hidden underneath it. The fear of hearing another promise. Another later. Ethan noticed it too. And for the first time in a very long time, he answered without looking at his phone, his watch, or his calendar. Yes, he said softly. Tonight. The elevator doors closed behind them with a soft chime. For the first time in months, Ethan Crawford left a business meeting before anyone else. Not because the deal was finished. Not because the investors were gone. Because his son was waiting. Noah stood beside him holding the tablet carefully against his chest. The city lights reflected across the glass walls as they descended through the hotel tower. Neither of them spoke much. Yet the silence felt different now. Less distant. More honest. Upstairs, Maya watched through the dining room windows as the black sedan disappeared into the evening traffic. Then she returned to work. Plates still needed clearing. Tables still needed resetting. Life moved forward. It always did. Yet she could not stop thinking about Noah's face when his father said yes. Some promises sounded ordinary, until someone had waited years to hear them. 2 hours later, Ethan and Noah sat together in the penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park. The city stretched endlessly beneath them. Usually the television would be on. Usually Ethan would be answering emails while Noah sat quietly nearby. Tonight was different. The tablet rested between them on the couch. Noah hesitated before pressing play. The screen lit up. A familiar face appeared. Ethan's breath caught instantly. Emily, Noah's mother. The woman he had loved. The woman they had lost. She smiled into the camera. Sunlight danced across her hair. Her laughter filled the room. Noah smiled. Ethan did not. He simply stared. It had been years since he heard her voice outside of memory. Another video began. Then another. Family picnics. Birthday candles. Snow falling across winter jackets.
Ordinar moments. Precious moments.
The kind people always assume they will have more of. At some point, Noah moved closer. Neither of them noticed. They sat shoulder to shoulder watching pieces of a life that once felt permanent. Then one final video appeared. The recording date was only weeks before Emily passed away. Noah pressed play. Emily looked directly into the camera. If you are watching this, she said softly, it means enough time has passed for both of you to miss me. Ethan felt his chest tighten. Noah lowered his eyes. Emily smiled gently. Noah, if you are older now, I hope you still laugh at terrible jokes. And Ethan, she paused. I hope you remembered something important. Ethan swallowed hard. Success is wonderful. Achievement matters. But people do not remember how many meetings you attended. They remember whether you were there. The room fell silent except for her voice. If life ever pulls you away from each other, promise me you will find your way back. The video ended. Darkness filled the screen. Neither father nor son spoke for a long time. Finally, Noah leaned against his father. Ethan wrapped an arm around his shoulders. Outside, Manhattan continued rushing through another busy night. Inside, time seemed to stop. Then Ethan quietly asked a question he had never asked before. Noah, how many times have I missed dinner this month? Noah thought for a moment. 19. Ethan closed his eyes. 19. The number hit harder than any business loss he had ever experienced. And suddenly, he understood why a waitress had recognized the problem in less than 5 minutes when he had failed to see it for years. The next morning, Ethan Crawford canceled 3 meetings before 8 o'clock. His executive assistant nearly dropped her phone. In 12 years, she had never seen him voluntarily clear his schedule. Investors could wait. Analysts could wait. Even the board could wait. Ethan sat at the kitchen table across from Noah, sharing breakfast for the first time on a weekday in months. The morning sunlight spilled across the marble countertop. Pancakes cooled on the plates between them. Noah looked almost suspicious. You are not leaving? He asked. Ethan managed a small smile. Not today. Noah. studied him carefully, as if testing whether the answer was real. Then he smiled and reached for another pancake. The simple moment should have felt ordinary. Instead, it felt priceless. Yet throughout the morning, Ethan found his thoughts returning to Maya. The more he replayed the previous day, the less sense it made. She had identified the real problem almost instantly. Not because she understood technology, because she understood people. Most professionals he knew would have focused on the device. She focused on the child holding it. That difference bothered him. Around noon, curiosity finally won. Ethan called the Grand Meridian Hotel. 10 minutes later, he was driving through Manhattan traffic. The city moved around him in its usual rhythm. Yellow taxis, street vendors, office workers hurrying through crowded sidewalks. But Ethan barely noticed any of it. His mind remained fixed on one question. Who was Maya Johnson? The lunch crowd filled the restaurant when he arrived. Maya moved between tables carrying trays and greeting customers with the same quiet professionalism he remembered. She looked exactly the same as she had the day before. No sign of pride. No sign of accomplishment. No sign that she had changed the course of a family's life. Ethan chose a table near the window. Maya approached a few minutes later. "Good afternoon," she said politely. "Table for one?" Ethan looked up. "Actually, I came to see you." A flicker of surprise crossed her face. Then it disappeared. "I see. Would you sit down for a minute?" Maya glanced around the dining room. "I am working. 5 minutes." She hesitated, then finally nodded. Across from him, she folded her hands calmly in her lap. Ethan leaned forward. "Yesterday, you noticed something that nobody else did." Maya smiled faintly. "Children are usually easier to understand than adults." "That is not what I mean." Ethan studied her carefully. "Where did you learn to do that?" For the first time, Maya looked away. The answer did not come immediately. Outside, a city bus rolled past the restaurant window. Inside, plates clinked softly in the background. Finally, she spoke. "I used to work with children." Ethan waited. "As a teacher?" Maya shook her head. "No, a counselor?" Again she shook her head. The silence stretched. Then she quietly said something that made Ethan sit back in disbelief. 5 years ago, I was finishing a doctorate in cognitive development and childhood behavioral science. Ethan blinked. The words did not fit the woman sitting across from him in a waitress uniform. "A doctorate?" Maya nodded. "I was 2 months away from graduating." Ethan stared at her. Suddenly the pieces began falling into place. The observations, the patience, the insight, none of it had been accidental. But one question remained. "Then why are you working here?" Maya's expression softened. For the first time, a shadow passed through her eyes, and Ethan realized the answer was going to change everything he thought he knew about her. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. The lunch crowd continued moving around them. Silverware clinked softly against plates. Conversations rose and fell like distant waves. Yet Ethan barely noticed any of it. His attention remained fixed on Maya. She sat quietly across from him, looking out the window for a moment before turning back. "My grandmother raised me," she said softly. "She worked 2 jobs for most of her life." Ethan listened carefully. "When I was accepted into the doctoral program, she told everyone in our neighborhood." A small smile touched Maya's face. She kept the acceptance letter on her refrigerator. Ethan could almost picture it. The pride, the excitement, the belief that years of sacrifice were finally paying off. Then the smile disappeared. A year before graduation, she got sick. Ethan's expression softened. Maya looked down at her hands. "At first, we thought it was temporary. A few treatments, a few appointments. Then the bills started arriving." Outside, rain began tapping lightly against the restaurant windows. Gray clouds drifted over the city skyline. Maya continued speaking. "I tried to do both, school and caregiving." She laughed quietly. "Turns out there are not enough hours in a day for that." Ethan remained silent. Maya did not sound bitter. That surprised him. Most people would have been angry. Most people would have blamed someone. She simply stated the facts. Eventually, I had a choice. She paused. Finish the doctorate or take care of the person who spent her whole life taking care of me. Ethan already knew the answer. You chose your grandmother. Maya nodded. Every time. The words carried no regret, only certainty. Ethan looked away briefly. Something uncomfortable stirred inside him again. He had spent years telling himself that sacrifice meant working harder, building more, achieving more. Yet sitting across from him was someone who sacrificed everything for a person she loved and never mentioned it until asked directly. What happened to the program? He asked. I left. Just like that. Maya smiled faintly. Not exactly. My professors tried to convince me to stay. Did they know why? Eventually. Ethan shook his head in disbelief. You were 2 months away. Yes. From becoming Dr. Maya Johnson. That was the plan. Ethan leaned back in his chair. The waitress uniform suddenly seemed absurd. The title, the education, the insight, none of it matched what he expected when he first saw her carrying coffee trays. Then another realization struck him. Yesterday, you never told anyone any of this. Maya looked confused. Why would I? Ethan laughed quietly. Most people would have. Most people are not me. The answer came so naturally that Ethan found himself smiling. For the first time in days, the smile felt genuine. At that moment, an older waitress approached their table carrying a tray. Maya, table 7 needs their check. I will be right there. The woman nodded and walked away. Ethan watched the exchange. You could probably be making 10 times more money somewhere else. Maya stood slowly. Maybe. Then why stay? Maya picked up her order pad. Because right now my grandmother needs me more than my resume does. Ethan stared at her. Once again, she had said something simple that carried far more weight than it appeared. As she turned to leave, he noticed a framed photograph hanging near the restaurant entrance. Maya stood beside an elderly woman in a wheelchair. Both were smiling. Beneath the picture was a small plaque that read, Family is the place where love shows up every day. Ethan looked at the words for a long time. Then he thought about Noah. And suddenly, a question he had never dared ask himself became impossible to ignore. That evening, Ethan arrived home earlier than anyone expected. The security staff noticed. The house staff noticed. Even Noah noticed. The boy was sitting at the kitchen island working on homework when the front door opened before sunset. For a moment, he looked genuinely confused. Dad. Ethan smiled as he loosened his tie. I told you I would be home. Noah grinned. You actually remembered. The words were innocent, but they landed heavily. Ethan set his briefcase down without checking his phone. That alone felt strange. For years his evenings had belonged to conference calls, financial reports, and endless meetings stretching across time zones. Tonight he ignored every notification. Together they cooked dinner. Nothing fancy, just grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup. Noah insisted on helping. The sandwiches came out slightly uneven. The soup was a little too hot. It was perfect. Later, they sat on the living room floor watching old family videos again. Laughter filled the room. Real laughter. The kind that had been missing for far too long. Yet even during those moments, Maya's words lingered in Ethan's mind. Because the more he thought about her story, the more uncomfortable he became. She had given up a doctorate for family. He had spent years convincing himself he was working for family. The difference suddenly seemed enormous. Around 9 o'clock, Noah fell asleep on the couch. Ethan carefully draped a blanket over him. Then he sat alone in the quiet room staring out at the city lights. Thousands of windows glowed across Manhattan. Behind each one was a story. Family. A sacrifice. A choice. His phone buzzed. It was his chief operating officer reminding him about an important breakfast meeting scheduled for 6:30 the next morning. Ethan stared at the message. Normally, he would have responded immediately. Instead, he deleted the reminder and opened a different contact. Reschedule everything before 9, he typed. The reply came within seconds. Everything. Ethan looked toward his sleeping son. Everything. The next morning brought shockwaves through his company. Executives whispered in hallways. Assistants exchanged confused emails. Investors requested explanations. Ethan ignored all of it. At 8:30, he was sitting in the front row of Noah's school auditorium attending a student presentation. He had missed every previous one. Noah knew that, which was why the boy nearly dropped his notes when he spotted his father in the audience. Their eyes met. Noah smiled. Ethan smiled back. And suddenly, the presentation seemed more important than any quarterly earnings report. When the event ended, Noah ran toward him. "You came." Ethan knelt slightly. "I said I would." Noah hugged him without hesitation. Around them, parents gathered their children and headed toward the parking lot. It looked like an ordinary morning. Yet Ethan felt something extraordinary happening inside him. For years he had measured success using numbers. Revenue, growth, market value. Today none of those things mattered. Because standing beside him was the one person who had wanted his attention all along. Later that afternoon, Ethan found himself walking back into the restaurant once again. Maya was arranging silverware when she saw him. "You are becoming a regular customer," she said with a small smile. Ethan laughed. "Maybe." Then his expression grew serious. "I owe you an apology." Maya looked surprised. "For what?" Ethan glanced down briefly. "For assuming money could solve everything." The restaurant grew quiet around them. Maya studied him carefully. Then she asked a question that stopped him completely. "And what do you think now?" The question stayed between them for several seconds. Maya stood quietly beside the table. Ethan looked through the restaurant window toward the busy Manhattan street outside. People hurried past carrying coffee cups and briefcases. Everyone seemed to be chasing something. For most of his life, he had been chasing something too. Bigger goals, bigger numbers, bigger victories. Yet somehow the moments that mattered most had been the easiest to miss. Finally, he looked back at Maya. "I think money solves problems," he said slowly. "But I do not think it solves the important ones." Maya smiled. It was not the smile of someone who felt victorious. It was the smile of someone who was glad another person had discovered the truth for himself. Ethan reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope. He placed it carefully on the table between them. Maya glanced at it but did not touch it. "What is that?" "A donation." "To whom?" "A medical foundation that helps families caring for elderly relatives." Maya blinked. "Why?" Ethan smiled softly. "Because someone reminded me that showing up matters." For the first time, Maya seemed genuinely speechless. Ethan stood. "And before you ask, no, it is not charity for you." Maya laughed quietly. "Good. It is gratitude." The afternoon sunlight spilled across the restaurant floor. Around them, conversations continued. Dishes clinked. Life moved forward. Yet something had changed. Not only for Ethan, for Noah too. Over the following weeks, dinner became a daily tradition. School events appeared on Ethan's calendar before business meetings. Family movie nights replaced conference calls. The changes were small from the outside, but Noah noticed every single one. One evening, nearly 2 months later, Ethan and Noah returned to the restaurant together. Maya was setting menus on a table near the window when she spotted them. Noah ran over immediately. "Guess what?" he said excitedly. Maya smiled. "What?" "Dad has only missed one dinner in 60 days. Ethan laughed. "He is counting." "Of course I am counting," Noah said proudly. Maya looked at the father and son standing beside each other. The distance that once filled every conversation between them was gone. Not because someone repaired a tablet. Not because someone spent money. Because someone finally paid attention. As they prepared to leave, Noah paused beside the restaurant entrance. He looked up at Maya. "Thank you." She knelt slightly to meet his eyes. "For what?" Noah smiled. "For fixing what nobody else could see." Maya watched them walk away together into the evening light. A father, a son, side by side. And as the restaurant door softly closed, behind them, she returned to work with the same quiet dignity she always carried. Because sometimes the most extraordinary people never change the world from a stage. They change it from ordinary places, one conversation at a time. And sometimes the thing that looks broken is simply asking to be noticed.